Today we're going to learn about the succession crisis and who had the right to be the next King of England in your opinion. Edward the Confessor died in January 1066 and he didn't have a son. So there were 4 people who had some sort of claim to be the next King of England, and all 4 of them wanted to be the next King of England. It's up to you today to decide who had the strongest claim. Candidate 1, Harald Godwinson. You should have heard of him before. He was chosen by the Witan. Edward on his deathbed went and pointed and named Harald Godwinson as his successor. He was also the most powerful earl. He'd chosen, remember, the rebels over his own brother in the Tostig uprising, which we've learnt about fairly recently. So yeah, there's different reasons to think that Harald Godwinson had the right to be the king. There was Edgar the Atheling. He was a young lad, only 14 years old in 1066, which goes against him. But he was the closest living relative to Edward the Confessor. He was only distantly related. He was his granddad was Edward's half-brother. That's how close it got to this. But yeah, it was still the closest living relative to Edward. And something that might show that he did have a good claim was when Harald Godwinson was dead after the Battle of Hastings. Harald Godwinson was who the Witan chose. But when Harald Godwinson was dead, it was Edgar the Atheling that the Witan chose second. Maybe they wanted to choose him in the first place, but they'd just been a bit too intimidated by Harald Godwinson as this powerful earl. Maybe so. You've also got Harald Hardrada the Viking, who has, well, not too big of it. He's no relation to Edward at all. He was convinced to invade, to try to claim the throne by Tostig, which was his revenge, and his way of trying to get back into power after the uprising, which meant he got kicked out. He went to Hardrada and he convinced him to come and invade England. But he did have some sort of a legal claim because the previous Norwegian king, who was called Magnus, and the previous English king before Edward, who was called Harthacnut, they'd signed an agreement that whichever one of those, Magnus or Harthacnut, died first, the other one would get both kingdoms. So if Harthacnut died before Magnus, and he did, Magnus had signed an agreement which said Magnus should be able to be King of England and King of Norway. But he never got England. Edward the Confessor got there first, the Witan made Edward king, and that was that. So when Magnus was replaced by Hardrada, Hardrada could rightfully say, well, hold on a minute, we as kings of Norway should be king of England based on that agreement. And that agreement was made at the Gotha River Conference. So yeah, Harald Hardrada got convinced by Tostig, and by a historic agreement from the kings previous, maybe had some sort of claim to the throne, but he wasn't related to Edward at all. And then you've got William of Normandy. His granddad's sister was Edward's mother. So that, again, there was a real distant relating, there was some sort of blood relation between the two, but it was very, very distant. But also, the Pope, God's representative on earth, supports William's claim to the throne. Edward might well have promised William the throne in 1051 when he'd had a falling out with the Godwins. So at some point he may have promised William. Also, Harald Godwinson, who was chosen by the Witan, remember? Harald Godwinson had sworn an oath to William. Now, we don't know, because it's lost in history, exactly what that oath was, but we know it was on religious relics, and we can guess William was probably making him swear an oath to support his claim to the throne. Now, significantly, Harald Godwinson swearing this oath, he probably didn't have much choice in swearing it, and we're going to look at that in detail in a number of lessons, but he did swear it on religious relics. So all of these 4 people, they've all got different claims to the throne, but they've got reasons why they perhaps shouldn't have been king as well. And in this lesson, we're going to have a little debate, and you're going to decide who had the right to be king. Before next lesson, we decide why was this a thing anyway? Why was there a succession crisis? And this is the succession crisis. A succession crisis is that it's not clear who the rightful king, after the old king had died, would be or should be. So not clear who the rightful heir was. And there we go, there's what we're doing about today. Who should have been the next rightful king?